Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here tonight and taking the time to continue in this planning process. We're looking forward to starting the meeting. And before we get started, I want to welcome community members who might be joining us tonight. You will be in listen-only mode, and if you have any questions or comments, please do use that Q&A feature in Zoom to share those with the project team. We also want to encourage you to email your comments to the project team, and Haley will drop that link into the chat. And as a reminder, we are recording this meeting. We'll be posting the video on the project website for anyone who couldn't attend live. Again, my name is Laura Labissiner-Miller. I will be your facilitator for our advisory group meeting for the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal project. Just a few friendly reminders for the CAG members. We're all familiar with this by now, but the features we're using during our Zoom meeting, we will use the chat feature and raise a hand if you'd like to speak during the discussion portions of our meeting. And here's our agenda. We'll be continuing our conversation on key project elements that will inform the level 3 screening with a focus on environmental analysis. We'll also be planning ahead for our next round of community engagement and really looking forward to hearing your input and helping us to get the word out about how we can engage the communities you as CAG members represent. We'll also reserve some time at the end to answer any questions about the same footprint alternative memo that we sent you all yesterday.
Question? Raise my hand.
Is that Judy?
I understood from our last meeting that the primary content for tonight would be the findings of your transportation and pre-ticketing studies. I received the environmental analysis only yesterday. I have not had time to read it. So if we're expecting a change in agenda and an intelligent conversation, we are not on the same page.
Thank you for sharing that, Judy. We do have traffic analysis as one of the topics that will be coming up at a future meeting. We have a number of content that we'll be reviewing over the next several meetings before we get into the screening process. Marcia will be doing a very thorough walkthrough of the environmental analysis as part of the presentation this evening. And we'll also, we understand that the memo, the document that we sent out was, it's a lot of information. So you can also spend some time reviewing that on your own. And if we can help answer questions after the meeting, we're available to do that and take comments after the meeting. But I want to assure you that Marcia will be walking through, and I apologize if there was any confusion about the agenda topics.
Okay, so in future, could you be really clear what the agenda is to be?
Yes, I think we can work to get that out more in advance of the meetings, just our agenda topics.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judy. So with that, Hadley's going to just give us a quick refresh on the project timeline.
Yeah, Judy, hopefully what I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides will help orient you a bit. As a reminder, we're here in level 3 screening. We have this set of 7 refined alternatives that came out of the level 2 screening. And this shows where we're headed with wrapping up the planning and environmental linkages study process and identifying a preferred alternative. We'll begin the process to identify that alternative by screening those alternatives later this year, wrapping up the Pell study report in 2025, and then identifying the level of environmental review and moving into the environmental review process under the National Environmental Policy Act and State Environmental Policy Act. And then in the 2029 timeframe, we'll be working on design and permitting and then into construction toward the end of the decade. So that's just a refresher where we're at in this early planning phase of the project right now. Another view of that is here. I think you've seen this slide before, but for those of you who have missed the last couple of meetings, or just to refresh our memories, we're in level 3 screening, where we have a set of alternatives that have different footprints and different configurations of the dock. We're working through different topics that we'll be using to screen those alternatives and selecting a single preferred alternative. As Judy mentioned, we've talked about several different topics: traffic, environmental. We've talked about different elements that we'll be using to screen those alternatives. And we're right now in the process where we're just having a series of meetings to introduce each of those topics to you, have some discussion on them, allow you time to review the analysis on your own, follow up with questions and comments, and then we'll begin the screening process later this summer and for the rest of the year. So we're not making any decisions, and we're not going to move forward with selecting a preferred alternative or screening the alternatives until we've gotten through this series of meetings where we're introducing different topics to you. The next slide shows the roadmap of where we're going and where we've been in the last couple meetings. So we wrapped up level 2 screening. We had this list of alternatives kind of in the middle of your screen. We shared with you earlier this year the level 3 alternatives screening memo and summary and the screening criteria, and got lots of good feedback on the screening criteria that we incorporated. And then at the last meeting, we discussed the concept for the intersection at the terminal. And then now tonight, we're going to be discussing traffic analysis, the good to go study and advanced ticketing study, cost and construction approach, not necessarily in that order and not necessarily one meeting per topic, but those are the topics we'll be covering over the next series of meetings, allowing you time to ask questions, review the materials as they're finished. The team is working fast and furiously to complete some of these studies and memos and analysis, and we'll be sharing it with you as they are ready to do so. And then after all of that, we'll move into the level 3 screening process, where we begin to apply the screening criteria that you all reviewed earlier this year. And then from there, identifying a preferred alternative before we complete the Pell study report in 2025 and move into NEPA. Are there any questions before I turn it over to Marcia to get into the environmental analysis and to walk through the memo that we sent you all yesterday? Any questions on the process?
Frank, I saw your hand go up.
Sure, thank you very much. So I guess Hadley, I'm just questioning these other 5, the environmental, traffic, good to go, cost, construction approach. Are these, you mentioned that it may be more than one in a meeting. Are these things we will talk about prior to this level 3 screening result? And do we have any intention as to how is this going to be one meeting you think all this is going to get discussed in? This is kind of the meat and the potatoes I think we've all been kind of waiting for.
It is, and I know you've all been asking for this information, so it'll definitely be more than one meeting, and probably more than 2 meetings, and then we're going to attempt to be mindful of your time without cramming too much content into a single 2-hour meeting. So our thought right now is we're looking at least another 3 meetings before we could begin the screening process, but some of these studies aren't complete yet, so it'll depend on the timing of them and how much time we think you need, and then the amount of questions and comments and discussion that they each raise, so we give you plenty of time to review them and ask questions and understand the information before we begin screening.
Can I just reiterate Judy's comment about enough time with information prior to the meeting? More than a day ahead of time would be, again, we'll ask this again, be beneficial, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Marty?
Well, just if everything goes right, moving into NEPA around what time in 2025? Early, late? How, just give me an idea on that.
You can correct me. I think we're talking about the second half of 2025. We'd be completing Pell in early 2025 and then moving into NEPA. Marcia, is that correct?
That's pretty much it. It will take a few months between ending the study the Pell study and then actually initiating NEPA. So it would be in that latter half of 2025 is a safe bet.
Okay.
Questions about the topics of upcoming meetings or sort of the process of where we're at? Okay, well, with that, I'll turn it over to Marcia, who's going to walk through in detail the environmental analysis that I sent you yesterday afternoon, if you want to have that open on your screen as we go through, or she'll be sharing a lot of the graphics on the screen.
And thanks for attending tonight, and I appreciate that you only got that document yesterday afternoon, but hopefully what we covered today will help streamline your review or focus it to the areas that are of most interest to you. So I think that you're familiar with this drawing here. You know, as part of the Pell process, we're evaluating how the level 3 alternatives interact with key environmental resources, including potential benefits and impacts to the surrounding environment. So this image should be fairly familiar to you now. It shows key environmental features near the terminal that we considered as we develop the alternatives and which we'll consider as we screen the alternatives. So there's the intertidal and nearshore habitats that include eelgrass and macroalgae near the dock, and which offer habitat for salmon and other marine wildlife. A recent survey that we conducted confirmed that there's no eelgrass in the area around the end of the dock, where propeller wash from vessels creates a scour hole, preventing macroalgae growth. And then there's Fauntleroy Creek, which currently flows under Fauntleroy Way southwest, then south of the dock, under the dock to the north, and then into Puget Sound. Fauntleroy Creek provides spawning habitat for salmon and trout. And then the aging dock itself is supported by creosote-treated timber piles and other creosote-treated wood members that together, that totals more than 1,000 tons of creosote-treated wood, which is a known water pollutant. The dense number of timber piles changes the flow of the creek and causes debris and driftwood to snag and collect under the trestle on the shore. This makes it difficult for fish to pass to and from Fauntleroy Creek. And then just north of the trestle is Cove Park, which offers public waterfront access and a narrow sandy beach to the dock. And then to the east is Captain's Park. It provides a public green space with bench seating across from Fauntleroy Way southwest from the terminal entrance. Next slide. So our analysis focuses on the environmental elements in the level 3 screening criteria that are most crucial to meeting the project's purpose and need. We develop these analysis by reviewing public data, conducting limited field work near the terminal, and considering input from communities, agencies, and tribes. So we will continue to use this information to apply the screening criteria to the level 3 alternatives and then identify a preferred alternative. After level 2 screening, WSF refined the level 3 alternatives and then reviewed how the alternatives respond to the surrounding environment. There were common environmental factors of each alternative, and these include raising the dock higher than the existing dock to meet rising sea levels and to allow more space and daylight under the dock. And then it's again removing 430 creosote treated timber piles and other creosote treated dock members. And then it's using fewer steel piles to support the dock, providing more space for fish to pass to and from Fauntleroy Creek and the surrounding eelgrass beds, which are important for habitat for salmon and fish. And then it's increasing the square footage of the structure built over the water. This is known as overwater structure to align with updated safety and design standards. Next slide. So today we're going to focus on the environmental screening criteria, and the full list of the level 3 screening criteria is in the level 3 alternative summary, which I believe that you've received. And if you need another copy, we can always send that to you. And I think that they're going to put the link too in the chat so that you can have that handy. So these criteria are accommodating projected sea level rise, avoiding changes to parks and recreational areas, including nearby Cove Park and Captain's Park, then permitting and coordination regarding the effect on and or opportunities to restore macroalgae and eelgrass habitat, increase in overwater coverage, environmental mitigation costs, cultural resources, and treaty fishing rights. Just to give you a perspective about sea level rise, the next slide shows the current dock, and the rendering below it provides a perspective of how elevating the dock increases more space for rising sea levels. So the top photo is existing conditions, and the below photo is one of the renderings perspectives that we prepared. So we know that the marine environment surrounding the dock provides valuable eelgrass habitat for forage fish, salmon, and other marine wildlife. So as part of the environmental analysis, we characterize 3 ecological zones around the dock, which are shown in this drawing. Zone 1 is the upper shore zone. This is the area closest to the shore where Fauntleroy Creek flows into Fauntleroy Cove. And then zone 2, it's shallow marine zone. The area around the dock, this is the most ecologically sensitive area where eelgrass and macroalgae grow. And then zone 3 to the west is the deeper marine zone. This is the area west of the dock where deeper water and less sunlight makes it difficult for eelgrass and other marine growth to be alive, more marine vegetation to grow. These zones are important as we move along. So the results of the analysis show that the A alternatives have less overwater coverage, but they keep the scour activity in the ecologically sensitive area at the end of the dock. We'll show you another visual again so that you can get that captured in your mind. Alternatives B and B3 have the smallest increase in overwater coverage while moving the scour activity into deeper water, creating opportunity for restoration of macroalgae and eelgrass. Then alternative C, it has the most overwater coverage. It also would move the scour activity from the vessel into the deeper water to the west. Next slide. It's some of the text is pretty small, but the same table is found in the environmental document that you were sent. So to avoid and minimize environmental effects caused by overwater shading, we've developed alternatives that taper and lengthen the dock. And this table shows that total amount of overwater coverage, including the existing dock. That it does not include the same footprint option in this table, and we'll share more on that later in tonight's presentation. But this table is a good snapshot of the sizes of each of the alternatives and the percent of increase of overwater coverage. Frank?
Thanks, Marcia. I just noticed in your previous slide, and says that A is the less overwater coverage. And I guess if you mean less, 30 to 40% increase. And then you say B is the smallest increase. And I guess if you're saying smallest increase is 81 to 100% increase, I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that. And that it's just your terminology here that you're using is maybe a little bit misleading. So
yeah,
just
we'll
want to make
to
sure that we're all on the same page on this, because I know we've had some challenge with terminology recently.
Yeah, and we'll try to work on that. I think that's a little bit why you got the document so late yesterday. If you'll notice, why the smallest increase is in zone 2, not overall for B and B3. And then for A, the A alternatives, A1, A2, and A3, it's really, if you're looking at them just straight on, then they have the least amount of overwater coverage. So there's some distinctions between the overall size and distinctions between how much coverage is in that zone 2, the ecologically sensitive zone.
Okay,
But
thank you.
thanks,
But
thanks for pointing that out. We'll work on our terminology.
yeah, but if you go back to the slide that shows the 1, 2, and 3, you look at the zone 1, or I guess I think it's zone 2. That's near shore habitat. I mean, that's like less than 5 feet. That's never going to grow eelgrass. So I don't know how that's can be considered something that, because of the, that's affecting the dock now because it's going to have less coverage. So I just, yeah. I mean,
We'd like to, get through the presentation that Marcia has, and then we'll have plenty of time for
Got it.
questions and comments. Thank you. Also, there is a comment, Marcia, or question in the chat here, if there is any significance to some of the figures bolded and the chart there.
I don't, that might just be a formatting.
I think
issue.
I think that's maybe
Yeah.
a formatting.
I think it's just formatting. There's no significance to them.
For confirming.
Okay. So, WSF will mitigate environmental impacts caused by the project caused by the project, and this will be in compliance with regulatory agencies and the tribes. And so we'll expand these key factors with that influence environmental mitigation, which are costs, total increase in overwater coverage, increase in overwater coverage in ecologically sensitive zone 2, and opportunity to restore eelgrass and macroalgae within zone 2. So those factors feed into they influence environmental mitigation costs. So based on these factors, we expect that alternatives B1, B2, and C will have higher mitigation costs comparatively to the A alternatives and alternatives B and B3, which have lower mitigation costs. Next slide. At this stage, we don't expect that there are really very much differences between the alternatives related to cultural resources. And that's because of the detail of design level that we're at with these alternatives. Fauntleroy Cove lies within the usual and accustomed treaty fishing areas for the Suquamish and the Tulalip tribes of Washington. And the project may affect these tribes' ability to exercise their treaty rights. So throughout the life of this project, we'll be continuing our consultation with the tribes to inform our work and how we screen the alternatives and how we identify a preferred alternative. So it's a lengthy process with the working through the tribes through this. So all level 3 alternatives evaluate the dock and use fewer piles, which would change the views and the experience that users have from Cove Park and Captain's Park. So as shown in these simulations on the screen, you can see that alternative B3 has the least effect on Cove Park with no widening to the north. And then alternative B1 has the most effect on Cove Park, widening the dock 22 feet to the north. To summarize the results, this table gives you that view of the information which we will use to complete the environmental screening for level 3 alternatives. So it's while alternatives A, A1, A2, and A3 offer less overwater coverage than the others, they keep scour activity in an ecologically sensitive location, which is the zone 2 area. And alternatives B and B3, they offer the smallest increase in overwater structure in the most ecologically sensitive area, and more opportunity for restoration of macroalgae and eelgrass growth. And then alternatives B and B3, they likely have lower environmental mitigation costs. Alternative C includes the most overwater coverage, and alternatives B1 and C have higher environmental mitigation costs because of that overwater coverage. And then alternative B1 has the most effect on Cove Park because it widens the dock 22 feet to the north. There's a lot of material information to digest. So at this point in the planning phase of the project, we just don't have enough design detail to effectively differentiate between the alternatives for certain areas of the environment. So in other words, environmental effects are similar across the level 3 alternatives for the categories that are listed here. And once we select a preferred alternative, once we have that evaluation, the following factors are possible that we can evaluate: noise, air and visual quality, construction effects, coordination with the National Historic Preservation Act and the Endangered Species Act, land use, and navigable waterways. So I'll turn it over to Laura to facilitate questions, which you've probably got a lot on your mind.
Thank you, Marcia. You know, that's a lot of information, so we're going to open it up to questions about the information Marcia presented, or any questions about how WSF will be using this information to screen the alternatives. Susan.
I just had a question about you had the qualifier that some of the options have lower environmental mitigation costs anticipated, and the A's were all listed there, but I was confused because on the other section you said that they all maintain the scour in the area that's most sensitive. So I was just wondering what, is it, I don't know, like it just is overhead coverage count for more than scour or something like that. I just was confused by that.
Well, it's a complicated equation when it comes down to it. But at a planning level, the leading factor that helps us understand mitigation cost is the amount of overwater coverage.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Sure.
Susan. Marty, I see your hand is up, and you also had a question in the chat as well about if mitigation funds will be used in the Fauntleroy area.
Well, that's actually sort of the question is, I don't understand the mitigation. Is it local? Is it anywhere? And what is it? Is it to help the marine environment? Is it to salmon? So if you know anything about that, that'd be helpful to know.
Yeah, Marcia, could you speak to that?
Well, it's again, I'm not trying to, it's that it depends situation, and that it's a complicated question, and there will be more than one regulatory agency that weighs in, and their responsibilities they have differing responsibilities to differing parts of the environment. And so based on the magnitude of effect to those resources, then it could be that we try to replace in kind, like be able to seed or plant eelgrass within the marine environment there to the degree that we can. which is the environmental analysis kind of identifies some of the alternatives that may allow for that. If we are not able to accomplish the amount of mitigation that's required by the agencies, then it could be providing funds to stock fish stock for another habitat or an adjacent habitat, or it could be providing funds into a mitigation bank, and we purchase credits for something, and that something could be another habitat, the construction of another habitat, but it all depends on the magnitude of the effect to the resources that occurs by the project. And that doesn't get quantified and identified until you're working with one selected alternative, and you can actually do the investigation to understand the context of the effects.
Well, thank you very much. And just one more quick follow-up. We used to have
Sure.
a forest of kelp, and we don't anymore. And is that just not part of the studies, or is there any information on kelp? And is it in the same eelgrass area, etc.?
I think that's why we use the broader term macroalgae at this point, until we can identify clearly each individual species that's on site.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Marty. Let's see if there's any other hands up. To Judy's point earlier, some of you may need a bit more time with the report itself to digest this information, and we have time later in the meeting and certainly after this meeting to continue answering any questions that come up for you. Justin?
Hey folks, sorry I missed the beginning of the meeting and might be jumping the gun a little bit, but I heard it said that we didn't have enough details on the different design alternatives to make a selection now, but I'm curious when those details will come and how that selection will be made.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.
Justin, I talked about that at the
Good
beginning.
question. We can go back to that slide, Haley. Go ahead, Hadley.
Yeah, Justin, I talked about that a little bit at the beginning of the meeting. Can you go to the timeline slide, Haley? That we're here, level 3 screening. We have that refined set of alternatives that we shared earlier this year that's in the alternative summary, the 7 different configurations of the dock. And now we're at the part where we're sharing information on each of the different topics related to how we would screen those alternatives, with the goal of identifying a preferred alternative toward the end of this year, and then wrapping up the Pell study, documenting this whole process in 2025. And we'll come out of it with a single preferred alternative and then move into the NEPA environmental review process, NEPA and SEPA environmental review process. So to answer your specific question, Haley, can you skip ahead 2 slides? Quickly show Justin. I know you were getting off a plane and you're a little late joining. This is where we're at now, sharing the environmental analysis. Then we'll be talking about traffic and good to go and cost and the construction approach. All of the topics that you all have been interested in and that sort of relate to the evaluation of each of the alternatives. And then we'll move into the screening, which is where we begin to screen out certain alternatives and identify a single preferred alternative. And we expect that'll be toward the end of the summer or fall, like middle to end of this year, we'll begin that process once we've covered all these other topics. Does that answer your
I
question?
understand. And then the NEPA and SEPA process starts from there.
Right, once we wrap up Pell in 2025 with a final study report, then we would move into NEPA and SEPA. And then after that, design and construction.
And for how long will the CAG, TAG, and EAG be part of the process?
Well, as we said at the beginning, we initially imagined you all being here to advise us through Pell. So through 2025 or the middle of 2025. And then we'll all discuss as we move into NEPA and SEPA, your interest in continuing. And we as WSF we'll sort of discuss what our community engagement plan is through NEPA and SEPA and into design and construction. We'll be doing community engagement the whole time, but whether we have a CAG and this set of 3 advisory groups or not, it's sort of still open for discussion. And of course, all of you can decide if you want to continue with us or if you've served your role and would like to, step off the group. But that's something that we'll discuss after Pell is over and what the structure of the community engagement looks like moving forward.
So about a year from now, then.
Yes.
Thank you.
Justin. Fletcher.
I think I'm finding the answer in the PDF here, but I just was going to ask about whether the changes in traffic from like moving more cars onto the dock would be considered in the environmental review, like if there's fewer cars idling, that sort of thing. And but it looks like it is in the PDF, which I looked through yesterday, but.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Fletcher. Yeah. I know Dave might be able to just address that quickly, and we also have Mark Bandy, who's our traffic lead, who's also listening in.
Well, maybe Fletcher, I'll offer a slightly different answer to your question, a little more general, which is kind of back to Justin's question. We're doing all of these various stages of analysis to kind of weigh the various alternatives against the technical constraints. And so we're going to do for traffic and how the dock operates, we're going to present that at an upcoming CAG meeting, just like Marcia walked through the various alternatives that are under consideration and how they affect the environment. We're going to do that same kind of exercise for you all in terms of how a larger dock manages traffic differently than a smaller dock, how good to go changes that dynamic. So we're going to be going through what Marcia did this evening. We're going to kind of go through that, and those will all be then factored into how we begin to screen out and narrow in. We're going to have to compromise and try to find the right fit. That's the big challenge. If the answer was easy, we would have already made it. So we have to weigh all those things against one another, and cost comes into that, constructability, all those things. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit. We're going to take what Marcia showed earlier, and we're going to do that for these other technical areas.
Yeah, and I guess just my point is just that to the extent that the traffic changes, like that actually is an environmental change, because it changes the emissions of the vehicles. If possibly fewer vehicles are idling, to be less emissions.
Yeah,
so
that's
I guess there just might be kind of a loop around on that.
That's captured in the NEPA process, and there'll be more, to Marcia's point earlier, there'll be more technical data that supports what the actual emissions are, the number of vehicles, what that impact is on the environment. We'll talk about noise in the same way, idling vehicles versus vehicles that are not idling. That there'll be a lot more analysis of that. What Marcia's providing here is kind of an overview of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Fletcher. Judy.
I'm wondering, what would it take to dissuade you from the need to enlarge I understand the tribes have resisted more over water coverage. Certainly the West Seattle communities have resisted that. We had advocated for improved service efficiency with modern ticketing process. You seem absolutely committed to enlarging regardless of other input. What would it take?
Thank you, Judy.
Will that get to the same footprint alternative conversation at the end, Dave, or do you want to address that now?
Yeah, I guess I was just gonna ask a clarifying question, Judy, as you ask about the same size dock, are you referring to the fact that all of these alternatives that we presented here today are larger than what's out there today? Is that your question? Or is it that you feel like there's already this preordained decision that's being made and we've settled on the largest possible dock solution? Because that's not the case.
No, but you have settled on a larger trestle.
Yeah, even the small, yeah, so for everybody's benefit here, even the smallest version of the new dock is larger than what's out there today. And I can walk you through why that is. Judy, if you want, we kind of
No, I guess I'm just not appreciating the weight of the different factors. It would seem to me if you can increase service efficiency by improving ticketing efficiency such that boats leave full and we basically eliminate the queue on Fauntleroy Way, that is a pretty strong case for not just enlarging the dock because of other factors.
Judy, did you get a chance? I know we didn't give you much time with it to read the memo that I sent yesterday.
Hadley, I appreciate the memo, but I don't speak Ferry, so it'll take me a while to wade through it.
Okay, that's more than fair. We only sent it to you 24 hours ago, a little more than that. So I just wanted to know if you'd seen it, because it does answer the question that you just posed in some detail. And it really the goal that we're after is to meet the purpose and need of the project and to find the alternative that best meets the purpose and need. To sort of flip your question around, what would it take to dissuade from a larger dock? It's really, we're looking at what does it take to meet the purpose and need of what this transportation facility needs to do.
I guess I'm feeling like you folks haven't put all the cards on the table, yet play has started. That's basically what my sense of it is. So I will go mute.
We do
Well,
have some time at the end.
Yeah, Judy, I'll just offer on this traffic analysis and good to go. It's a lot of work for us to really get into that and really understand how the traffic is going to behave in these various alternatives. And I know that this group has been very patient, and we appreciate that. This process has taken longer than we had hoped, but we don't want to come to you with half-baked ideas and false senses of what certain, say, advanced ticketing solutions could provide you. We want to provide you with the full benefit of what that analysis has looked like. And it's just taken us longer to get that into a consumable state. There are some real challenges around the operation of the dock as it's currently sized. And we're kind of hit on that at the end of the presentation today. And so if we can just kind of hold that, I'll walk you through it. But yeah, I know you guys are all anxious to see this traffic analysis, and it's very close to being done. We hope to share it in our next set of meetings, and we'll talk more about good to go and what that would do and how that would help us operate. So I appreciate everybody's patience there.
I'll just add, Judy, that if there are things that you think cards that we haven't put on the table, to use your analogy, please let us know specific things that you think we haven't shared other than the traffic and good to go. We've heard that. And as Dave said, that's on the list for future meeting topics, but you know,
Right, we have been
these
waiting
things
for
I
that
think
for
we're
the
not
longest
elaborating
time.
enough on.
And when you talk about service, improving service efficiency for all communities involved on the Triangle route, those are very, very important cards. And I realize the complexities of the studies and trying to make sure that they dovetail and whatever. But I think you well know what cards we're looking for.
Yes, we very much do, and we're just as anxious to see those studies as you are, and that's why we're trying to make clear at the beginning of the meeting, we're not moving into screening until those cards are on the table, and we've had those top discussions, and we've shared those studies, and we've had those conversations. So no decisions will be made, no alternatives will be taken off the table until we've covered those topics.
Thank you, Hadley and Dave, and thank you for your honesty, Judy. Other comments? I know Hadley is excited to talk about upcoming community engagement and how we'd like to include all of you in that process.
Before we move on, I'd just be curious to know sort of a general show of hands of those of you who feel like you have had enough conversation about the environmental analysis, and those of you who are wanting more time with the material and would like another chance, you know, more time to look at it, and let us know your comments because you expect to still have further feedback. Laura, I don't know if you want to sort of have people raise their hand, but I know Judy, you said you wanted more time to read the material and then share your thoughts, but how are others feeling? Just so we can get a sense of timing and when we'd want to schedule the next meeting and how much time on this topic you want to have.
It would be nice just to have another little touch in on it, because it was such a big document. I really couldn't digest it all in one night.
Right, that's
helpful. Thank you, Susan. David?
Sorry, I hit the screen by mistake, but yes, we need more time to review this. It was sent out way too late for anybody to effectively read that. So yes, I vote that we at least continue this discussion on this, at least for one more meeting. I honestly had no time at all to read it, so I don't know about the rest of the panel. So thank you.
Thanks, David. Also, just want to note the chat comments here. Gary, just appreciating having information one card at a time, to use Judy's analogy, and that it's really important to understand these elements kind of in pieces. Thank you, Gary. And Marty, I see your hand is up. Marty, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I thought I was. So, yeah, I did have a chance to read it, and I wanted to circle to something that hasn't been presented to this group, which is that there is a section there about all of the environmental problems that occurred during construction, and to the parks around, or to the traffic, and spud anchors and barges out in front of the on the north side, and there's just I would think that would be a very difficult time for anything trying to live in the eelgrass, and wondering how you mitigate something like that, and what what that really means.
Yeah, thanks, Marty.
Yeah, Marty, we're required by the permits to operate at certain times of year and do that work when the fish are not spawning, for example. So there are restrictions on us that provided by the services, and that's in part how we minimize the potential damage to aquatic life. We also, during construction, have both marine and bird monitors on the derricks and on the dock, watching for whales or rhinoceros octolots and other types of waterfowl that are particularly sensitive to pile driving, for example. So there's a number of things that we're going to do to minimize that. But Marty, I think you're hitting on the nail on the head. It is going to be quite an operation to replace this thing. There's going to be equipment in the water, month after month, trying to drive piles, build the new dock, and do this the whole time while we're trying to keep service open. So those are some things we're going to talk about in a subsequent session, because I think it's important. It drives a little bit the construction overall cost. But we'll look for some input on that time.
Yeah, I would add that each of the permits we get, and it's based on all of that data that we provide in the environmental review document. We'll have terms and conditions listed out, and each of the agencies have done, that's their arena, and they've done a lot of study on different construction techniques and what they do to the environment. And so the terms will outline very specifically what we can and what we can do and how to best avoid and minimize impacts. You mentioned one thing, having spot anchors down, and our WDFW are one of the permits, Army Corps of Engineers, and also the Endangered Species Act agencies. They all have terms that say you can only have a spud anchor and a barge here for so many hours, and then you have to move it so that the shade of the barge and the footprint of the spud anchor has minimal impact. So that's a lot to explain in the document. So we explained it at a higher umbrella level.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. Could you also just talk a slight bit about the continuous noise that you mentioned in this document? Where you're saying that you'll have the intermittent high decibel noises of the pile driving, but then there'll be the continuous noise. And this is, of course, important to the marine and other animal cultures, but also the neighbors.
Yeah, so David's talked a little bit about that, and that's the reason why we have protected species observers during activities that have a certain noise quality in the water. But we would always be abiding by the City of Seattle's noise regulations, and would do noisy activities during the day within the specified hours that they have. And only if there were certain activities that we had to do at night, we would obtain the appropriate noise variance. And all of that would be, upfront when we choose a contractor. We do a lot of work with them. We partner with them to be able to figure out the most efficient way to build something so that we're not keeping it a noisy environment the whole time, but minimizing that. And we follow those guidelines and regulations, both by the city that we have related to that, and then with the environmental regulators for our marine habitat.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Justin, you're on the move and you've had your hand up. Come on in.
Thanks so much. I am curious if we've done any environmental analysis about a no action alternative. And I want to ask specifically about the pilings that have been failing at the current Fauntleroy terminal. I think in recent days, we've had some lane reductions down to one lane on the transfer span. We've had a number of other individual creosote piles crack and fail, and all of those things require barge work for the existing terminal. So it strikes me that the existing terminal itself is not without maintenance and construction needs, and I just wonder if that gets considered as part of this analysis.
Yes, it does. What we've been showing you and talking about are the build alternatives, but the no action alternative is that when we get to the environmental review stage under NEPA, we have to analyze that identified preferred alternative in comparison to the no action alternative, and or the no build alternative. That's a better way of saying it, because it really isn't no action at all. It means keeping the terminal as it is, and doing regular maintenance to keep it functioning as it is. And so, as you've noticed and been witness to, that means there are maintenance barges out there fixing piles that fail as individually or in groups. And that would be the no build or the no action alternative.
Right. Yeah. I feel I need to highlight that that's not a small number of piles that are failing on the current terminals. And it seems to be pretty persistent. And, you know, having one lane, losing a lane on the transfer span is a pretty significant impact to the entire route there.
Yeah, Justin, the specifics on that I was going to touch on at some point, but we had a large drift log knock out one of the caps that supports the dock, and therefore there was no connection between the dock and the pile that would normally support that. So we had crews out there all of last week. We had those lane reductions that you talked about. They adjusted the cap, put it back into place, reset the drift pins, and now we can drive on that. What Justin's hitting on is, you know, exactly why we're all here. There's an obvious need to replace the dock. It's structurally deficient. It's having these problems on a recurring basis. Our on-call contractor is out there. Seems like every 6 months doing something, and that's just going to continue until we have a project.
And so just to be clear, to follow, thank you so much for that. The concrete pilings that would be part of any new build alternative will be stronger than the current creosote pilings. They'll be able to withstand things like that. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. They won't be impacted by the drift logs that get underneath the dock. And the connection between the cap that supports the dock and the pile itself will be reinforced so that it can handle not only the day-to-day, but can handle an earthquake.
Thank you so much for that. I'm done.
Yeah, thank you. We have a number of folks who've chimed in the chat here. So Justin, we heard from both you and Scott that you're satisfied with the information and conversation and don't need additional time. And then we also heard from several others, David, Ann, and Frank, that they would appreciate some more time. So we will plan to circle back on this topic. And again, we can, you know, answer questions in the meantime, respond to comments if you want to send those in as they come to you. Dave, this next question is for you, from Greg, asking if this will be a design build project or if we've made that determination yet.
Yeah, for those that don't follow this lingo, design build is a process where the state hires a contractor who does the construction and the design of the new facility versus a design bid build project where the state designs it and then we put it out for advertisement and the low bidder wins the contract and builds it. There's some risk sharing that is involved in both of these options. At this point, we haven't made that decision, but we have met and we've had a number of meetings internally about the advantages and disadvantages, I should say, of both of those options and trying to weigh those against one another. We're getting ready to make a recommendation to our new assistant secretary on that, and we will have an answer certainly by the time we next meet on what contract delivery method we're going to use for the trestle replacement. And then the next question looks like it says, will the concrete piles be steel jacketed piles? Yeah, we have gotten away from precast concrete piles. Those were in style in the 90s. We do all of our new construction using steel pipe piles tied into concrete caps. Laura?
Thanks, Dave. One more question from Frank here about if there's an option for slowing the boats down in and out of the slip at the lowest tide included to address the impact on eelgrass on the options that do not extend the trestle. Marcia, could you speak to that one?
Help me understand your question a little bit more. So the options for slowing the boats down.
When the boats come in, when they come into the dock, at the lowest tides, their prop washes right down adjacent to the sand. You would kick up sand, which is, I think, the perceived problem. But yet, if you were to slow the boats down at the lowest tides, you would have a less impact and potentially less sand movement or therefore less impact on the natural quote unquote environment. On the options that don't extend the dock out. Obviously, you've got options that extend the dock out way out. So just wondering if that was thought of.
I don't know if we've taken it to that level of thinking, but it's good to have had you voice that for us. I would think that there could be some issues with asking with that process overall, and just making sure that we're keeping to our schedule. But the point of extending the dock out is to eliminate that scour hole, because we are in deeper water. So even if we did slow down vessels on their approach in that location, then it would we would still have that scour issue. And I think Trevor wants to add information to this.
Yeah, Marcia, I was just gonna agree with you. There really hasn't been much discussion about that part yet with the captains and stuff. So, but I appreciate the recommendation, Frank.
Thanks, Trevor.
I'll just add that one of the elements of the purpose and need is to maintain the existing sailing schedule and maintain the existing on-time performance, meet our on-time performance goals. So we need to look at it in a service planning context, how you'd build in that extra time into the sailing schedule and still be able to meet your sailing schedule if you were going to take more time at certain tides to do the crossing by slowing the boats down.
Well, I would say that anytime you have anybody working at the docks, slow steaming is going to be required for every single sailing. I'm talking about just at the lowest tides, where with the minus tides or the -3, which happens a couple of times a year and only for a couple hours a day. So it would have maybe 1 or 2 impacts to sailing time, but might help be an option. That's all.
I think it's a good comment to look at in terms of that scour. I can see Marcia's writing.
Thank you. Hadley, I actually think this next one is for you as well, from David in the chat here, asking about the construction approach and wanting to make sure that the design is reviewed by the community and the team ensures that it meets the needs of the community's input, that we reflects this residential scale and not industrial scale. Could you speak a little bit about the community engagement process during construction?
Yeah, I could start, and then Dave, I want Dave to weigh in too, because he knows a lot more about design build and the different delivery methods than I do. But, and then the bottom line is community engagement will be a part of this project for the entire life of the project, no matter what method we choose. And that's something that's a commitment WashDOT's even more committed to than ever recently in many different ways, and is requirement of different elements of legislation recently. So the community will be involved no matter what project delivery method we choose. And that involvement starting now with some of your early comments that are going into selecting a preferred alternative, and then we'll continue through design as we get into that more detailed level of design and what the look and feel of the terminal is. But Dave, can you speak to how in a design build scenario the contractor would still take community input into account for the design?
Yeah, so, yeah, really, real simply, those requirements that we feel strongly about in terms of the context sensitive design, the aesthetic, the architecture, those can be included in the contract, so that the contractor has to follow those. There's other things in the design development that has to do with how big the piling are, what those connections look like. There's lots of opportunity for innovation in how they construct and stage. But if we feel strongly that the structure should be painted green, we can put that in the contract, and the contractor will bid on a green structure. If we want it to be, pink, then we can put that in we can provide a level of specificity. And I'm joking a little bit there, but in a lot of the recent projects, the 520 project through Clyde Hill, the 520 project through Montlake, the SR 519 project down at the stadiums, those were all done with a very prescriptive, context sensitive design approach, and the contractor was required to use natural product or to do certain types of stamping on panels and colors and brickwork down by the old Safeco field, now T-Mobile. There's specific things that they had to do, and we put those in the contract because the community in those cases had weighed in on what the final product would look like.
The difference is when in the process that community input comes, either ahead of putting it in the contract or during the design process if it's done by the state. We've also talked about this in terms of service levels during construction and other requirements that we put in the contract in a design build situation to make sure that the contractor's meeting our service needs and operational needs. It's all part of the process Dave talked about making this decision and the different benefits and advantages and disadvantages of both methods.
Thank you, David. I see your hand is up.
Yes, design build does not work that way. Design build is the lowest price contractor, and so they always try to find ways to cut costs. And if they can eliminate costs by eliminating some of the designs and requirements of the community, they will do it. And they will always find a way to do that. So I think it's very important that we, as a community and as a team, designing and improving this trestle, maintain the quality of it as to the design. So I am very, very, very sensitive about letting somebody else design it and then trying to approve it afterwards and saying they meet our needs, because they won't. So I think it's very important that we have a design that the community can approve and appreciate before it goes out to bid. And then it can be bid on and then work from there. That's actually the best way to get a project designed and built that meets the requirements of everybody involved, the community, the ferry, and everybody.
Well, David, I'm not going to argue with you too much on this, but we can put you in touch with the advisory groups on the 520 projects, and I think they'd have a different take on their level of input into what the final product looked like and their general pleasure with how those lids worked up at Clyde Hill and the new lid over the Montlake interchange. So there are ways to make it work, and that's certainly something we aspire to do.
Once again, those are all industrial looks that I've seen so far on all those projects you've mentioned. Once again,
they're also design build projects, and that's where the community was allowed to weigh in on what the final product looked like. So there's ways to do it.
We need a community design project, not an industrial design project. And everything you're saying so far is going to lead to an industrial design project.
That's a great comment, David, and we've heard similar comments from Susan and others in previous meetings about the importance of the aesthetics of the terminal and the design and the look and feel and context within the community.
So what is the reason you don't want to submit a design and have a bid on?
I think that this topic we should probably postpone for another meeting, because as Dave said, these conversations are ongoing and there hasn't been a full decision process on the delivery method, and I don't think he's really ready to talk about the pros and cons of each of them yet. Dave?
Yeah,
are you-
yeah, this is a standard, design, this is a standard construction project in terms of how it's put out to bid. So I don't see why you don't think a completed design that makes us happy first goes out and then is bid. If somebody bids on it, then we have to approve whatever they do after the fact. That doesn't work. You're always approving a lesser solution that is the cheapest solution, not necessarily the best solution.
Yeah, David, we see here that you have a lot of interest and others do as well on construction. It's certainly important that we have that conversation. I do want to remind everyone that it is one of our little boxes on the roadmap that Hadley shared earlier. So we will be talking a bit more about the approach to construction before we complete the level 3 screening.
How about the approach to the design? We haven't even approached the design. And that's part of the construction. That's how the bid starts, is with the design.
Yeah, I
Sure,
think we'll have,
that's a part of that meeting, and the delivery method of the project, which is design bid build or design build, that we could talk about all that at that meeting.
Is there a problem with just having it designed and then put out to bid?
I think what we're saying, David, is that decision hasn't been made, and Dave and his team are still kind of working through evaluation of the different project delivery methods. So
And what will be the criteria to decide
to talk
that?
about it today.
What will be the criteria to decide which method to go?
that'll be one of the topics when we get into that conversation. So we're gonna go ahead and move along into our next couple of slides. Hadley.
Okay, moving along. It's been a number of years since we've had broader community meetings. As we said, the process has been taking a little longer than we'd intended to get through some of these early stages of Pell, but we think we're at a good point right now to go out for some community meetings, engage the broader community beyond you and the other 2 advisory groups, and get some input and inform everyone about what we've been doing and some of these considerations and what the alternatives are that we're looking at and what the screening criteria are. So we're planning to hold community meetings in April, actually early May. And as part of that round of outreach, we'll be holding pop-up events in the communities, virtual community meetings, some meetings on Zoom like this meeting, and like our standard WSF public meetings that we hold twice a year. We'll have an online open house that people can access at any time and kind of click through and move through the material at their own pace. And then we'll be doing community briefings as requested to groups within the community, and going to give presentations and answering questions and talking about the project. So all of that's coming up in the next month to 2 months. And we wanted to just share that with you here and let you know that we'll be sharing an engagement toolkit with all of you. As you remember, one of the key roles of the CAG is to be those liaison with your communities and to help engage other members of your community, as many of you have been doing already. So we're looking to you to help email others in the community, share on social media, post flyers, whatever method works for you to encourage participation in the project, and let people know that they have an opportunity to learn more and weigh in and ask questions at these public meetings. And then also let us know if there are areas that you think we should focus on, or groups we should speak to, or events we should be at. Thank you, Frank, for suggesting we participate in the FCA event the other day. Sorry we couldn't do that at the last minute, but that's a great example of the type of event we could go to if the timing aligns with this round of outreach. So I just wanted to put that out there if anyone has ideas that they want to share today, or just to kind of plant the seed in your mind to be thinking about this and your role, as all of you represent different elements of the community, different groups, different communities and stakeholder groups. So how you could engage them and encourage participation. Happy to take ideas now, or you can just let us know offline as you think of them. But Laura and her team will be sharing this engagement toolkit with you as we get closer to the public meetings. Frank?
Great.
In one of your in your bullets, you mentioned that I think something at the ferry dock. You know, I'm just thinking it might be a good idea to have it maybe up by the gas station where you have some real estate where people can pull over possibly and get out of their car before they queue up in line. So they might have an opportunity to provide input. If you do it down at the ferry dock, people are driving, you know, they're inching past and they're on their way already. So just maybe a thought.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's a good idea. And then before they get in line.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, one of the things we're also considering is all of the students that are walking on every day and making sure that we're able to have a chance to connect with them as well. Marty?
Well, I just wonder practically how this will work, because there's just such a high volume of info. And if you're trying to get them to weigh in on alternatives, or if you're just trying to get them information about where they can look for more info, it's just a conundrum to me how would these community meetings work and not turn into, excuse the word, shit show.
Thanks, Marty. I think that's actually a great question we'd like to pose back to this group. I know that you all have participated in many of these meetings over the last couple of years since we've had our last community meeting. You've seen a lot of the topics, information that our team is reviewing. And so we'd love to hear from you kind of what is most compelling as we're looking the information you've seen so far and as this team is working towards ultimately moving into screening and selecting a preferred alternative. Susan, I see your hand is up.
Sure. I was just thinking if on all the, information and wherever flyers or wherever pop-ups that you have, if you had one of those like QR codes that people can use their smartphone to just do a scan and then it takes them to the website that's got all the details. Like, I feel like a lot of people are using that feature, and that would at least get the word out in that way. And then I'm assuming you are, like, this is probably just such a given that you already shoot your stuff to the different communities' newspapers. Yeah. So
Yes, and yes. And I know we have the West Seattle blog listening in this evening, one of the news outlets that we work with closely, but all of the news publications, Hadley will be in close contact with them.
And Marty, to your point, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. We've been wrestling with it, which is one reason why we haven't had public meetings in the last couple of years, because we're not at a point where we're actually sort of soliciting much input as like we would be when we get to the screening and put out there sort of a proposed preferred alternative. But we felt like there's such a volume of information and it's been so long that it's still worth having a meeting to kind of remind people what the project's all about and share the content that's in that alternative summary. So what are the 7 different alternatives and what is the screening criteria? And reminding them of the Pell process and the project timeline. And so a lot of this will be more informational and less of a, we need your comment type of meeting. That'll be coming at the next major milestone. But I think it'd be hard to ask people to comment on the screening results when they haven't even heard about the project in over 3 years. So I think this is going to be more of a briefing and, telling people about the project rather than asking for comment on anything in particular.
Thank you.
But we're really open to input from all of you, as Laura said, on what you think people would be interested in or how to sort of walk that line of accepting input and comments, as we always are with. There's nothing like in particular that we're asking for input on at this point. We're not at that point yet.
Sadly, David, in answer to your question in the chat, we will plan to have flyers at the toll booths. We also have that information available on screens on the vessels, and then we've also explored the idea of having kind of flyers that we would share not only with you to post in the community, but also we can take those out and post within the 3 communities. Places, community gathering places and coffee shops, grocery stores, that kind of thing. Frank?
First off, I'm sorry, everybody, for being, so talkative on this stuff, but question I would have to try to answer your question of input is if you ask people questions, are you really planning on, if you ask a person a question, are you really planning on taking their input and doing something with it? And what I mean by that is if you put this information out about these 7, I just can see if you put the information out about the 7 alternatives, you're going to get a whole slew of people on all sides. But, how is their input really going to have impact? And is it like sharing too much information? I'm trying to say this, and I don't know an easier way to say it, but, or is it more or less you just want to say, hey, look, we're still working on the project. We're still moving forward. We're still doing our thing. We're still here. This is still going to happen, and just stay tuned. I mean, I don't know which one is better. I bring that up, and I just thank you for the opportunity.
I think we're leaning more for the latter. There's, again, we're not asking for people to vote on the alternatives or give input on which alternatives. We're not there yet, as we've talked about as a group here. We won't be next month either. Won't be at the point where we're screening those alternatives or evaluating them or ready to select one or the other. So I don't think that's really as valuable as questions about what we should be looking at, much like you've all been doing for the last year. In our last round of input, we asked for sort of what issues we should consider as we approach replacing the dock. And then really it's the second part of what you said, making sure people remember the project, are familiar with the process, know what the timeline is, when their input will be asked for. So this is much more of an informational meeting than we're asking for your input, because we want to avoid exactly what you said. I don't think it's valuable at this point to say, tell us which of the alternatives you like best, because we're not ready to do anything with that information. We're not ready to make a decision until we have all the information on those topics we all talked about earlier. But we can share the purpose and need, we can share the alternatives, we can share the screening criteria, all the kind of the building blocks to what that decision will include. Okay, well, that's all I have on community engagement, and share your thoughts and stay tuned. I think one of your big roles in the next month or two will be to help with this engagement in any way you're willing to, and encouraging participation, sharing the information, maybe answering questions from those in your communities.
Great, thanks everyone. We can go ahead and move along. This is just our final couple of slides. Dave. Talk to us.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say, you're going to talk to us a little bit about the same footprint alternative memo that all of our CAG members received yesterday.
Yeah, so we wanted to follow up on a request that we received about a month ago from several of you on the discussion about a same footprint alternative. We have been using this same size dock, quote unquote, kind of loosely, and what we have always meant by that is that the dock capacity of 84 cars remains unchanged. But what was brought to our attention is that obviously that the footprint of that alternative A is actually larger than what's out there today. And so we understand your concerns about building a dock that's larger than the current dock. We do take that input seriously, and we wanted to share kind of why what the challenges are with that approach, for this. And we sent out a response to, I think all of you got that earlier on and with some of the key highlights. So I want to kind of go over that here. We did consider, but eliminated this same square footage alternative during the Pell study. This changes the available holding on the dock, which I think is the number one issue that we have here, while holding other constraints that cannot be adjusted. And so therefore the option doesn't meet the purpose and need. And I'll be more specific here with the bullets. It does not provide efficient and safe loading and fare processing for pedestrians, vehicles, and bicyclists. The dock would be too crowded for crews to effectively sort and stage trucks, ADA, emergency, and other priority vehicles, because the holding itself available holding lanes would be less. It does not provide operational efficiencies that support reliable service. There's less space to hold vehicles, so that means there's more backup on Fauntleroy Way. And there's this inability to sort the traffic destined for two destinations. So that's another challenge in managing the on-site. And then finally, it doesn't improve the multimodal connections, which is a key legislated mandate under the policy titled Complete Streets. This was a RCW 4704-035, look that up, that the Senate passed a year or two ago, that requires us to accommodate bicycles, pedestrians, and again, to the context sensitive nature of the facility. Those laws bump up against the idea of eliminating bicycle lanes or trying to keep the dock within that footprint, because it no longer it enhances the customer experience. It doesn't also accommodate ridership growth, which we anticipate and is consistent with our 2040 long-range plan. And it really overall reduces the service level and doesn't meet our projected ridership needs. So throughout this whole study, we'll continue to evaluate alternatives that meet the project's purpose and need. We continue to engage all of the communities throughout the process, and we do appreciate the feedback. I'm happy to take a few questions on this. So I hope that sort of lays out a little bit why the same size footprint does not work as a replacement.
And we recognize you only got the memo yesterday, so if you need more time with it, you can also talk about it at a future meeting, or you can email Dave and me.
Thanks, Dave and Hadley. Just pause to see if there's any questions about that memo, about the information that Dave just shared with us. Marty?
Well, I'll take a stab at this. I think, on paper that all looks like, it makes a lot of sense, but would remind you that in the beginning, this is called terminal replacement and not expansion. And we never got any information that we were not providing safe loading in our, current situation. And as far as efficiency is concerned, you know by your own statistics that this dock has been more efficient than many others, that we are in the 91, 92, 94% in the years 2018, 2019, 2020, even in the good old days when you had full boats and 3 of them running. Before COVID, this was the only dock that made an efficiency improvement, and it did it because we changed the schedule. We didn't build more places to hold cars over water. There's nothing in any of your plans that have looked at multimodal, and I would remind you that we were the only ones, the Fauntleroy people, who said, hey, your purpose and need completely forgot that. Your first purpose and need was when we went, what? You're going to keep up your program that supports single occupancy vehicles and not make any of these other adjustments that would really begin to decrease and get out of the car culture. Now I understand that your business is vehicle transport. You really don't have a major business about passengers. Lots of things have changed since we've been involved with you. It's been years and years now. And now we have a water taxi midday because of King County. Now we have King County stepping up, not King County, the legislature stepping up and putting in money so that a new 2-boat schedule can go in. So there's things that have just not, been part of our experience of the way that you're tackling this problem. And I just, I would also say that very disappointed on your last meeting with us where you said that good to go could be neutral or negative. When we have 3 studies that have said, this is the place, this is where you're stuck, you don't have the land, you can't, do the things that you did at Mukilteo or other places. This is where you should really think about processing as one of your key ways to improve efficiency. Right now you have some horrible problems. I don't know why. It used to be we had a rush hour. And the same track study said, look, if you, did everything possible, you would transport a total of 124 more cars during rush hour. If you did everything possible, which is not a huge improvement, because you're limited not by dock space, you're limited by number of boats and crews and the distances, and that's just a problem that Trevor could perhaps help us solve, because in the 2-boat schedules it's now getting even where you have to change the schedule 3-4 times a week, and that's Fauntleroy isn't having as much troubles with backup as Vashon is. So, I'm maybe getting rambly here, but essentially, this project starts because we need the dock not to fall apart and into the water. This project doesn't start because we were terrible at operational efficiencies before. We weren't. We were always ahead of the crew. I mean, head of the line. That's it.
Thank you for sharing your perspective, Marty. See, we have several others with their hands up. Fletcher.
Oh, I just like to give just the opinion that I think like maintaining current service levels is very important. Like we're currently at lower than normal service levels, and we're barely meeting those. There's a boat canceled just about every day. There's, and some of that is crew for sure. But yeah, but just it's like reducing the number of cars on the dock would be very bad. I often ride the ferry as a transit, person, and just the idea of extending the line of cars further up Fauntleroy, even so, is a terrible idea to me. So anyway, I just want to say, like, I think the wording wasn't good, because it kind of, it did imply that the A option was, similar to the current one, but I think having it be operationally the same is the right viewpoint. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback.
Strongly worded in the memo, but we acknowledge that the wording in the level 2 screening report wasn't good, and the wording we've been using, some of you have pointed out the word same size dock has been bandied around, similar size dock. Frank has pointed out multiple times 30% doesn't feel similar. So we acknowledge that. I think there's a line in the memo that says it wasn't well communicated or stated, but hopefully this memo helps explain the reasoning why the same footprint alternative, hopefully that term is a little clearer, doesn't work, but the same vehicle capacity, the same operational capacity is something we're carrying forward.
Sadly. Justin, I see your hands up.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I just, when we're talking about this project, I don't know how anybody can say with a straight face the Fauntleroy terminal is efficient. It's clearly not, and it has major limitations in terms of what it's capable of doing. You know, there was a time when we had 80-car ferries, and they ran a lot more frequently, and you know, we were able to meet that because the landside capacity at least matched the capacity of the vessel. But I just need to share the opinion that there's no possible way that a same size terminal could meet even like 4 years ago's demand, let alone the demand that we're going to see in the future. But my question specifically, just to clarify from the memo, is that alternatives A1, 2, and 3 are therefore still under consideration. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's correct.
To add square footage the same, reducing the vehicle holding capacity of the dock. So the memo is explaining why that isn't something that meets the purpose and need, but it's keeping the same set of 7 alternatives that we've been presenting for the last couple months.
Yeah, maybe I could use a highway analogy to try to explain this a little better. I mean, the state and the counties, we replace bridges. You know, every year there's always bridges being replaced, and I know you've all been on a 2-lane country bridge, narrow lanes, no shoulder, no sidewalk, no bicycle lane. When the county or the city or the state come along and evaluate that, they don't say, hey, let's just build it exactly the same size as that. They look at the usage of that route. They look at the bicycle traffic, the pedestrian availability, and of course the current safety requirements, which provide shy distances and shoulders and standard lane widths that didn't exist in 1950 or 1920 when that bridge was built. So what we did in this memo tries to capture this is we looked at it from the standpoint of standardized lane widths, bicycle lanes, adequate places for people to walk, and ADA folks can be accommodated. You know, safety, and the dock itself, by just the design itself, keeping it at the same footprint, actually creates less distance from, you know, guardrail to guardrail than what you have out there today. And so what it did is it dropped 2 holding lanes, and so the dock now in this scenario would only have 2 holding lanes and 2 exit lanes versus 4 holding lanes and 2 exit lanes. That's what the current design standards require. That's what's safe. That's what accommodates bicyclists and pedestrians, and so those are the things that we're wrestling with. Obviously, you heard the environmental impacts of expanding the dock and mitigation. Those are things that we have to weigh in this. But I think, you know, Justin kind of hit on it. You know, we have to be mindful of what the current design standards are. We're required to provide bicycle lanes. We're provided to standardized lane widths. Those things are very constrained on a dock that was built in the 1950s. So, you know, we don't build baseball stadiums and football stadiums like we did in the 1950s. And, you know, we're looking at all the alternatives, and we're going to try to make the best decision we can around the constraints that exist: money, construction timelines. If there's other ways to be efficient, we certainly want to look at those, and if good to go is the silver bullet, then that would be great. But we need, until that decision has been made, we need to weigh all of these impacts, and we have to work within some basic guidelines for what a new facility would look like.
Thanks for providing that context, Dave. Devin.
Hi. Yeah. I was just gonna echo some of the sentiments. I think I saw some in the chat as well, but I know that the dock it's been around for a long time, and I know there's definitely multimodal safety improvements that need to happen as well. and that using that same footprint is just not going to accomplish all those goals. And thinking of even, the current situation, great example is the 1:15 ferry leaving Fauntleroy today. It's the first ferry in 2 hours. The line backs up the hill, and just this week they had to leave unfull because already boats were backing up. There were probably space for a good 20 plus more cars on the ferry, but everything would just continue to fall off schedule. And so I think that's a classic example of, if it needs to be rebuilt anyways, it might as well serve both multimodal, environmental, and also schedule needs at the same time, since it just has to be done regardless. And I do think that, yeah, if there's a good time to come in with other efficiencies like Good to Go, like that's great. I don't think that rules that out, but clearly there's a lot of like multifaceted issues going on with the current dock as it is. So I was just gonna put that out there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that perspective, Devin, and just real relevant recent example. Marty?
Yeah, just a quick, I agree with a lot of what Devin was just saying, and that the key is that the dock fills faster than the boat loads. And then, things just keep as fast as the boat can load. If the dock can load faster, you won't have those 20 spots. And you guys know that. So that's the end of what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Marty. I know we've been harping on the operational efficiency and having those upcoming conversations around traffic analysis and Good to Go, which I know really gets into a lot of some of the comments that we've heard tonight. Dave or Hadley, any other final comments on this topic?
Yeah, I'd just add, if there's questions that come out of the review of that document and you'd like to ask us for more insight on that, I'm happy to field emails or phone calls from you all if you'd like to talk about it some more. Yeah, that's all I have. Thanks, Laura.
I was gonna say, and that we're intending to include this memo, this summary of why that alternative is not included in the Pell study report as sort of documentation of this decision. And you're welcome to share it if you get questions from others in your community as well. I know this has been a topic that's come up multiple times.
I think I don't see any other hands up. Can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So we do have some next steps just to wrap up the meeting this evening. As Hadley mentioned, that engagement is coming up. We're looking to nail down some dates. We'll be sending those out by email in the next couple of weeks. And then our upcoming CAG meeting topics. So these are those boxes that we saw on the roadmap earlier tonight: traffic analysis, Good to Go, and advanced ticketing, as well as the cost estimates and construction approach. And then again, as we heard this evening, we're going to circle back at our next meeting on the environmental analysis, just to cover any final questions or comments about that information that we've shared with you all. And then we'll move into the level 3 screening later this year, before working to identify a preferred alternative. Any final questions or comments before we let you all go? Frank.
Sorry to be out here again, but if you can go back that one slide, I'm hoping that, and we've said before, and I think everybody would agree that these last 4 items, this is really kind of the meat and the potatoes of this stuff. And I think for everybody, this is what we're really kind of all interested in. And, we spent 2 years getting to this point. I sure hope that the information that comes out is more than a day ahead of time. And 2, that there's more than 2 meetings to discuss these 4 topics. And I know that because, again, whatever happens, this is the meat and the potatoes of it. And Dave, you know how it is. You bid a job and 3 years of engineering studies and the contractors get a month to bid it and then they come in too high and everybody complains about it. You got to have more time with this stuff. And so I would advocate for as much time as possible ahead of time and to discuss this, because I think we all have some input or some ideas here on this stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree, Frank. I mean, I think this traffic analysis and good to go stuff we're going to tee up next time, and that it really is the meat of a big part of this. And yeah, we're looking forward to having those conversations. I think you guys will get a lot out of it, and we'll get a lot of good feedback on it, and you'll kind of hear some of the things we're wrestling with.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Frank, and appreciate you speaking up and saying that. I mean, a lot of what Davis shared tonight about it, the reasons why it's taking our team so long to work through this information, it's really complex, and we understand that it's going to take some time to have those conversations with all of you.
We'll try to give you as much notice of when the meeting will be as possible, but that's one reason we haven't set dates of these upcoming meetings, because we don't want to set a date and then the material's not ready. Or the night before, as unfortunately happened this time. So we'll be letting you know when the next meetings will be as early as we can, but trying to walk that fine line of getting the information from the team ready to share with you and then giving you enough time to review it before the meeting.
Okay, I think with that, we can go ahead and close out our meeting this evening. Thank you again, everyone, for spending another evening with us. We really appreciate all of the conversation, all of your perspectives, and just feedback throughout this process. So thank you again for participating, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any follow-up questions or feedback for our team.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.